Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Going to start off front and foremost with, well, our Donald. He's at it again. Evidently, the Donald disagrees with Anthony Fauci, disagrees with common sense. He thinks everything's going just great. Now, Fauci said that the current state is really not good. He says we are still knee deep in the first wave, which I think all of us kind of understand. When you see the rise in numbers, especially in places like California and Florida and Texas and Arizona and really and all of the states, you're getting a little bump up. You kind of go, we're still dealing with a problem. Now, Trump still has this mythical mentality that it's just going to go away. Just going to go away. That's what he's clinging to. And look, it's not surprising because he's got nothing left. They've bungled this from the beginning, and I know they want to take credit for fixing it because they really do. They want to be able to say, hey, we did something. We're still in the middle of the first wave, and they're not preparing us for down the road what is going to come. In fact, what they're doing is they're actually making things worse. As today, Trump officially began the process of withdrawing us from the World Health Organization. Evidently, they have notified the United Nations and Congress of the withdrawal. Democrats, trying in vain to get him to change his mind. And surprisingly, Republicans saying, probably not a great idea. Maybe don't. Maybe don't blow up all of our international alliances. Maybe don't cede all of the international power to the Chinese. Maybe don't. And it's one of those things where I know the more you tell a child not to do something, the more they're going to want to do it. This is one of those things where, maybe our child needs to listen. Just kind of throwing that out there. Now, the Trump administration keeps saying that we're doing all this testing and the testing is wonderful, the best ever. We're doing more than everybody. We're doing more testing than everyone combined. Not true, but it's a good talking point. Makes the dim go, see, we're doing something. Evidently, the reporting now coming out is in those places, like I said, Texas, Arizona, Florida, testing's getting a little short. In fact, as one report I saw said that in New Orleans, one of the testing sites there in New Orleans, they opened their door for exactly 5 minutes before they had to close the door. All the tests were gone. So that only left, 23 hours and 55 other minutes to not do testing. But those first 5 minutes, man, those were the best 5 minutes of testing in the world. If you follow the Trump logic, because we did that 5 minutes, we did more. If you extrapolate those 5 minutes to the rest of the 24 hours in a day, we're just aces. Now in Phoenix, evidently in Phoenix to get tested there, some people claim they've had to wait up to 8 hours to get tested. And you go, is that what we should be doing? Now here's the problem. The problem is we're now hearing areas in these states that are having an increase saying that they're only going to test people who have symptoms. Only people with the high fevers and the cough and the stuff that I had to answer the long line of questions for my kid at the dentist's office. Do you have any temperatures? Have you traveled out of the state? Have you done, basically this whole checklist. And we're only going to test people who are, saying yes to all of those things. And the thing is this is the really bizarre part in all of this. The bizarre part in all of this is we know that we need to do more testing, and that testing people who don't have symptoms, that's considered, and look, I'm not making this up, that's considered one of the key ways that we control the spread of this thing. Like the Atlanta mayor, for instance, you know her? She's positive, has no idea how she was infected, had no idea she was positive, but yet there she is testing positive. If we don't test her and she goes about her day and infects a whole bunch of other people, can we agree that that's a bad thing? So here we are in this moment where, understand, the administration wants to take credit for something it hasn't done. And they're doing everything they can possibly do for us to actually do what we need to do to help them, well, take credit for the things that they didn't do. We're really in this bizarre, screwed up spot. But the good thing today out of our EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, came out today, 2 new effective treatments to kill the novel coronavirus on surfaces. Don't get crazy. 2 new Lysol products, a disinfectant spray, and a disinfectant max cover mist that you can put on your surfaces and kills the virus. Now, just as kind of a public service announcement, don't ingest this. Don't shove it in any orifice. Don't inhale it. None of that. I don't want to hear any stories of people going, well, you said it was going to kill the virus. On surfaces, not in the human body. And I know we've listened to Trump with the light up the behind and that stuff. This isn't for that. But hey, good on Lysol. They're going to make a ton of money as people run towards it. Now, the weird thing is, and I keep coming back to this moment, if you walk around my neighborhood, it's now turned into this weird political statement to where if you have a mask on, you're now on one side of the fence. And if you're not wearing a mask, you've taken this other bizarre political statement. And as I've been saying the last couple of days, the weakest links are the ones that we are dependent on for our collective survival. And those without the mask are weakest links. Just kind of throwing that out there. If you walk into a store and you see a whole bunch of people without masks on, we know who they are. Like I said yesterday, the guy with the sign bit, there's a bunch of people walking around with their sign. So, again, we're in this weird moment, and I'm just hoping that this turns away from a political moment and that people actually do begin to protect themselves. I know that's a lot to ask for. I know I've had every conversation with every person giving me every reason why they can't possibly wear the little piece of cloth on their face in the store or in enclosed spaces, or why they can't not go to the bar. Which I don't get. But our collective survival is based on that. So I got lots to get to today. Some interesting news coming from our FBI director about China. As I said, a year ago, China is going to be the issue of this election. We're going to have our China expert here to share some thoughts on the latest news out of that. Also, the schools, they're talking about swinging the doors wide open. We'll talk with Jamie Martin, the president of APSCUF, about what the professors here in Pennsylvania are looking at as the state system looks to open their doors. And when we come back, our good friend Tom Arnold is going to be here to share some thoughts on evidently Roger Stone's begging for a pardon. I guess the trial thing didn't go well, so we'll get Tom Arnold on after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
More American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1894. That was the day thousands of Pullman strikers confronted state militia forces at the Grand Trunk Railroad crossing in Chicago. The strike began on May 11th after George Pullman slashed wages but refused to lower rents in his company town. In late June, Eugene V. Debs and the American Railway Union called for a national boycott of all Pullman cars. The boycott spread to 27 States involving more than 150,000 workers. Attorney General Richard Olney issued an injunction declaring the strike illegal on July 2nd. The injunction failed to break the strike, but it did prevent union leaders from communicating with strikers. The next day, President Cleveland ordered troops into Chicago rail yards to crush the strike. Workers were furious. They flooded the yards, stopping trains, smashing switches, and barricading themselves with baggage cars. Fighting continued for several days as angry strikers stormed rail yards and overturned empty freight cars. Thousands of workers impacted by the Depression joined in, including those stranded in the city after the Columbian Exposition. 2 strikers were shot dead on the Illinois Central Railroad on July 6th. Workers responded by setting fire to hundreds of rail cars. Now, on this day, the militia attempted to run a work train to clear the rail yard at 49th and Loomis. Thousands followed the train, showering it with bricks and stones. The troops returned gunfire, killing at least 4 and injuring dozens. Chicago unions soon voted in favor of a citywide sympathy strike, but the railroads quickly hired replacement labor. Federal troops and state militia cleared the railway for business. Main strike leaders were arrested. By the beginning of August, Pullman rehired only those strikers who agreed to never join a union. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So evidently Roger Stone is looking for a pardon. I guess he claims he's gone all the routes he can go. They've tried to rig the system to get him his lightest sentence. Now he's asking for a pardon, and it ain't coming. I just don't see it happening. But, hey, we'll see. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the big news of the day. I've asked our good friend, actor, comedian Tom Arnold to come back and talk with us. Tom, thanks for taking time for us.
Yeah, Rick, it's an honor to be here. You're a hero. I was just watching Brett Baer there on Fox News. His wife was my trainer, Kathy Kaler. Great woman. And, Brett, he was in the military. And so, he does a pretty good job there. He had Mike Pence on there, and he asked a question, Brett Baer. He said, "Now Trump said 99% of the COVID suffers no problem." So then he asked Mike Pence if that's true or not, and Mike Pence doesn't answer the question. And it must be so frustrating for a journalist to ask a question and then have all that BS from Mike Pence, right? I mean, can you not ask a question and get an answer? What is the point of having a news program and being a journalist, especially a journalist for the military? What is it, Brett Baer? His wife would, Kathy Kaler, she's tough. She'd grab me and go, "Run up that hill, Tom.
Yeah.
You're fat. Get up there." What's wrong with people? Don't we deserve an answer? Like, why are people so scared of Donald Trump? Especially when people are dying.
Yeah.
It's crazy. How far is it going to go?
Yeah, but that's not just now. I mean, go back to Sarah Palin, during the debate saying you're going to ask questions, but I'm going to give you whatever answer I can dream up or pull out of a certain orifice.
Especially bad. Bubba Wallace, NASCAR, which I've always loved. We had some of the best moments we've ever had because of this Bubba Wallace noose thing. Because NASCAR don't mess around. Let me tell you something, man. When I had the Best Damn Sports Show, I got to sit in on drivers' meetings. And of all the professional athletes, man, they sit there. And this is when Jeff Gordon was number one. And, Dale Sr. was alive. And, man, the people that ran NASCAR, those guys sit there. And those drivers' meetings, man, they sit in the seat. Because the people that run NASCAR are the boss. And, man, I'll tell you what, NASCAR today, NASCAR got behind this. They investigated this. We know the whole story. We know what a noose feels like. We know the truth. And then Trump. And, man, those guys, man, when you saw those guys, all those drivers coming out with Bubba Wallace, man, if you didn't get tears in your eyes, you're dead. That's it. So, and then Trump tries to take back these great feelings and these great motions. And, man, that's what sports is about. Trump said he's not a sports fan. And he calls out our one black driver, and he calls him, the cruelty, somebody's got to just knock him out. He is just, that's unacceptable. that he does that and he gets away with it.
Yeah.
And you know what he's doing, and you know what he's doing with the Confederate flag. You know the guy that created the Confederate flag did it to show that white people are superior. So every time you look at it, you go, yeah, that's a reminder that God made white people better. He is, and why are people, why isn't everybody, the cruelty to Bubba Wallace, is that okay that he's picking on the president, most powerful man in the world? You got to get down on your knees and apologize, just like he did to Obama with the birther stuff. And it, that's outrageous. Plus,
no, I'm with you. I know it's completely outrageous, especially since, as I remember the story, Bubba Wallace didn't. It was pointed out he didn't make a huge deal out of it.
No, first of all, he did. The NASCAR interviewed 1,500 different drivers, different people for different garages. No one had ever seen a noose in their garage. Yeah, it was in there before Bubba Wallace got in there. Bubba didn't find the noose. Someone else did.
Right.
Now, the effect of seeing a noose to an African American is way different than me and you. He didn't make the deal of it. Someone else found it from NASCAR, brought it to their attention, and NASCAR decided that. So it had nothing. Bubba Wallace didn't hoax it up. He didn't make the deal of it, and NASCAR invested every single thing, and they had his back. He didn't lie. No, but the other drivers were like, "Oh my God, I wonder how that must have made him feel."
Yeah.
And of course, they're understanding these things, and then Trump to do that. And plus, he's taken away my good vibes of all the NASCAR guys walking that slow walking about there. People are crying. I'm at home crying. That's bull, and that's the real story. And he knew that.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, he's really trying to. All he's got left is. Stoking these racial tensions and continuing to divide us. NASCAR being one of those places that I always thought the Bubbas with their Confederate flags, and their nooses, that was their thing.
But why can't he's being cruel to a man? He's being cruel to the one guy he thinks he can pick on.
Exactly.
Just like he did to women and women of color. And I would say what I'd like to do to him, but then I have the Secret Service back at my house. He should be kicked out of the White House right this moment.
I'm right there with you, but here's the thing. We find out that some new things about this Mary Trump book. I don't know if you've seen this, but again, it's another one of these moments of everything that we've talked about, everything that we know about Donald Trump. She's just confirmed that he's a liar, he's a cheat, he's a thief, he's a no good con man. Yeah. He's all of those things and probably needs a couple of good beatings. But, his supporters don't care.
He's never been punched in the nose. When you're in high school, no matter who you are, you get punched in the nose, and it's good for you because you realize, you see stars, and you realize, holy hell, that's a real deal. Yep. If you never get punched in the nose your whole life, you go around punching other people, but everybody needs it because that's it's stunning. To be punched in the nose, everybody needs it.
Yeah, it's an eye opener. I've been saying for years the worst thing that ever happened to this country is when little 5-year-old boys stop beating each other up on the playground because that's when you learn the lessons of life. I
got news for you. They still do. My son, he's in kindergarten. He's bigger than the 5th graders. They just do by you accidentally get your nose punched by just wrestling around and stuff. But this Trump guy, let me tell you something. John Bolton's book was excellent. Now, John Bolton's an asshole. We know that. He's a monster.
Screw John Bolton.
But the fact that he got his book out, and you cannot ignore the stuff that he said. Oh, yeah. I mean, it is, he's still, but it's out. And what is in there, and the fact that the Republicans aren't like, holy hell. So every little piece of this, everything everybody can do. Michael Cohen called me, and, he's got his book, and he's such a interesting character. He's such a whatever. Everybody's got their thing.
Yep.
Everybody, but it's all cracks in this. He's melting Trump. He can't even read the speeches.
Right.
He's melting it. And the president of Brazil now has COVID.
Yeah.
That maniac.
But here's the thing, Tom. the reality is we already know all this stuff about Trump. Mary Trump's book, John Bolton's book, which I did not buy. They sent it to me. We had him on the program last week. I would never spend any money on Bolton's book. All of this stuff we knew. We already knew this stuff. There's nothing new here, and his supporters don't care. You're never going to move the flag-waving Trump supporter ever.
You don't, but it doesn't matter about those guys. It just is more cracks in the veneer, and he hates it. And I'm telling you, it makes a difference. It makes a difference when Michael Cohen calls me and yells at me and says, "Listen, Trump saw that tweet of yours, and I got 21 days in the hole," because he reads those tweets. And then I called Eric Swalwell and I say, "Listen, you got to get when Trump's out of there, you got to get the Justice Department to get the documents where Trump told Bill Barr to put Michael Cohen in the hole for Michael Cohen's book to make him look like more of a badass." And I said, he calls Michael Cohen and says, that'll make you look like more of a badass. You got thrown in the hole because Michael Cohen can be such a wuss. So in the end, but the fact that he would do that because I tweeted, and I did tweet on purpose about his book. I said, I wonder if he's still reading my tweets. I'm going to tweet this crazy thing. And he did. He was supposed to come home, and they stopped it and put him in the hole. Now, all that stuff is insane,
right?
And nonsense. But it's got to be over. And Trump one of these days is just going to lay down on the floor and just start rocking like a infant.
Do you think he has the capability of doing that? I mean, do you think
he's
really
going to quit? There's no way he goes to 2020. There's no way he makes it. He's going to quit. That's why you got to keep piling on. He is just lying, and he barely can talk now. He can barely get it out. He's just looking stupider. He's going to have a speech that's all N-word soon. The fact that he's got the Confederate flag and he's like talking he's gone back before the Civil War. He's back with the Native Americans. He's back before that. He's gone back, and he doesn't know what he's talking about. He's got that Stephen Miller and writing stuff from his fever dreams, and he makes no sense. And everybody around him, defending him, and they're blaming this Fauci guy, and the people. His world is about this big, and he's losing supporters. He absolutely is, Rick. He's losing his base. One, they're dying, a lot of the old people, and two, it's just getting this small.
Right, which is why I keep saying have the big rallies. They're going to have another big rally in New Hampshire here very soon. They had the one in Tulsa. They're still going to do the thing in Florida, evidently, with their convention. I'm saying, knock yourselves out.
Guess what? They're not going to. It won't be a big rally in New Hampshire. The convention, Chuck Grassley's not going. He's 113 years old. He's not going. But you're going to see it. It was bad in Tulsa. It's going to get worse. Because also the people like myself that are up to no good, things are going to, it's going to look like it's going to be a great rally, and then it's not. And the Biden campaign has invited people like myself to give them ideas. Before it was a pretty boring social media, pretty boring campaign. Excellent. But now they brought in all the fun people. And now we're gonna the rest of the way we're gonna see what we can do.
There you go. No, it's good. I mean, because the sad reality is, Joe Biden on social media has been pretty bad, and Trump has They've allowed Trump to dominate that. You got to push back.
But also, you can't. But what can you do to compete with that guy? I mean, it's ridiculous, and you can't even. You just get his guys out there defending what he says. And, this thing about the Afghan, the Russia,
the bounty.
Bounties. Now, there's something there. John Bolton, by the way, went on TV and said, yeah, I told him in 2019.
He said that he would have. And that he agreed with Susan Rice because he can't say, because I asked him about this specifically. He said, I can't tell you specifically, but I agree with Susan Rice, who said that if it came to my desk, I would have run right into the president's office.
Right.
So you can extrapolate from that he did.
Yeah, and the thing that they're used to defend Trump is, oh no, he doesn't want to hear anything about Russia, so he wasn't told, or but it's still bad because Bolton's book, things add up that he's not getting the information, and he's embarrassed so many servicemen and women, and it's just adding up, and it's just not looking good, and people are feeling, well, he's not really. Too many times this happened, and too many times he's not looking out for these folks, and it's just, however you look at it, he should have the information, but he doesn't, or he doesn't care, or something's not operating correctly.
No, he doesn't care. It's simply, you were right there. It's simple. He doesn't care. If it's longer than 2 pages and doesn't have pictures, he isn't going to read it. So don't give him a presidential daily briefing because he's not going to read it. If it doesn't have pop-up pages and coloring diagrams, forget it.
The most important thing that Bolton said was everything is about him getting reelected, not the country, not the country's well-being, not anybody's well-being. But when he was on The Apprentice, when he, I knew that about him as a human being long before this. Everybody did involved with that show. Everybody knew that he was the worst human being they'd ever met in their life. Now, he's tolerable on the show because you could edit around him. But as soon as he it looked like he might be president, everybody should have stood up and said, okay, this is going to be,
Exactly.
But people like Burnett said, oh, no, I'm going to get on board this train. I'm going to get on board and make money. I'm going to make hundreds of millions of dollars. I'm going to sit next to him. I'm going to talk to him every day, but I'm going to make this work for me. And that's why all these guys that are still like, well, the judges, well, the this, but that doesn't even work with how bad things are. People look at America like that. What's that? The movie, The Tiger King. That's what everybody in the world looks at America like. What's these documentary series about the guy with the
I know what you're talking about.
The lions, whatever that Netflix series. He's in prison now. The guy that raised the lions. That's what the world looks at us like. We're that guy, the crazy lion guy, and we are.
Well, we are. But here's the thing. To highlight what you were just saying. The people who made those justifications, we're getting the judges, he's going to be good for deregulation, he's going to be good, the hammer on those workers. He has delivered on everything that they wanted. You look at this PPP program out of the coronavirus bills. All of his donors, all of his supporters, they've all cashed in. They've all gotten their money. They're all lining their pockets. This is, again, for me, it's about the kleptocracy. It's about robbing us blind at every turn. The sideshow they'll tolerate as long as we line their pockets.
Well, I worked at the Hormel meatpacking plant. It was for 3 years on the kill floor. I'm proud to say it. And when he went into Iowa, the meatpacking plants and said, oh, we're going to use the defense, whatever it was, because America needs pork and beef immediately. Of all things, I'm going to use this thing to get these guys in there. It's dangerous enough.
Right.
And he said, I'm not going to have the OSHA rules. We're going to work everything, stand side by side. Again, it's dangerous enough in there. And people, we're not even going to pay attention to how many people have the virus. People are dying. People, they got the governor of Iowa, Kim Reynolds, is a moron. She loves Trump. We're going to jam these people in there. We're going to put a lot of immigrants, by the way. We're going to get in there for America, and we're going to test you. Maybe a couple guys on the way out, but it is the most. And the guys, meatpacking plant guys like me are like, hell yeah, maybe some overtime. Maybe we're saving the country. Trump's like, you guys are saving the country like World War II, because we have to eat a lot of freaking pork.
Not to mention that they exported a good bit of that as well. So they're claiming, where there's this huge shortage. We need our patriotic meat cutters to go in there, only to find out that we were shipping it overseas because, hey, profit above people above all else.
To his buddies, to China, of course. Well, here we are, Rick. Here we are.
Let me finish up with Iowa, because I saw your Senator Breadbags, Joni Ernst, who evidently was on TV talking about how well Trump has done, and how horrible
She just
Obama
can't
was.
say a word. She cannot say a critical word. She cannot represent her constituents. She was in the military, man. She's a sitting U.S. senator. She's the first female senator for the state of Iowa. Well, I want to be so proud of her, and she just can't do it. Oh, it's so effed up. It is so disappointing.
No, I mean,
And
you know, the reality is Dana Bash pointed out that, you know, they criticized Obama's failed leadership when 2 people died of Ebola, but here we are, 130,000 people dying of coronavirus, and not a peep about Trump.
no, she criticized Obama with too.
No, that's what I said.
Yeah, and she can't do it, and she's been put on the spot by Iowa women Republicans, and they said, "Why can't you do it? Why can't you do it?" You know, she supported Steve King last election until the very end because Trump told her to. You know, it's like she has post-traumatic stress, and I know she'd been through some. Her husband was abusing her, but it's the same thing with Trump. He is abusing her like he abuses all these other women. She has a platform where she can say, "That's enough. I'm going to be the first one to say that's enough. I'm going to stand up for my state and my people and for women, and I'm going to tell the truth because that's not true. People are dying, and this is a lie, and this is it. And if it costs me my career, so what? I was a member of the United States military, the armed forces, and I'm going to honor my oath, and that's enough." And she has that opportunity to do that. I've stood up to my ex-husband. What I went through, I was honest about that, and this is it. And she won't do it. He's going to get his ass kicked in the election. He's going to get slaughtered. And this is going to be her legacy. And it's ridiculous, Jody Ernst.
Yeah. So,
you know, Iowas deserve better. Iowas are better. And it's humiliating and embarrassing. And, man, I go at it hard with her, but because of this.
Yeah.
Because I wore Wonder Bread bags on my feet, too. It's not just her. I cut the nuts off many hogs, more than her. And I expect more from her.
there you go.
For real.
No, I'm with you. I put bread bags on my shoes too. I remember it as a kid because it's how you kept your shoes from getting wet.
I didn't want to, but Dad made me.
We were poor. We didn't have any choice.
Yeah,
that's just how it was. Before I let you go, I understand you and the kids and Sasha, your assistant, have come together and put out this great rap video.
Yeah, we have. You know, the kids, we're quarantined here. You know, I used to be cool, man. Rick, I was very cool. I still am. And Sasha, my young assistant, she's living here now because of quarantine. She sleeps on the couch. And she is cool. She's a young, cool woman, but it's all of us together. And she's sleeping on the couch. And the kids wanted to go to the School of Rock camp, you know, the Jack Black. I'm like, dude, I know Jack Black. I am a star of the movies. We will make our own School of Rock music video. I have friends that are rappers whose dads are doctors, but we're going to make a cool ass video here talking about what life is like here for this badass who knows, you know, Snoop Dogg personally. We really did make a cool rap video. Everybody, all the guys that worked on it have already had COVID, including myself, but it's a killer. And it's how I feel about living here with the kids and how Sasha feels and how the kids are they kill it, man. And there's a couple dirty words in it because people always ask if Sasha and I are blanking. But, you know, it's how you feel. I'm still a thug when I live here with the kids and I have to clean up a lot after. Check it out. We have so much fun.
We'll make sure we get that out on social media so people can take a look at it because I think it's fantastic. But you brought up Snoop Dogg. You got high. Of course, you got high with Snoop Dogg, right?
Well, no, because I was sober by then. Let me tell you something, Rick. If it had been just smoking marijuana that I did, I would still be doing it. But I was, because I loved it. When we made Soul Plane, we filmed a lot of it in the shell of a fake 747. And Snoop Dogg does not smoke fake marijuana like on set. You're supposed to do that when you're filming. None of those guys did. Method Man, Kevin Hart, all the guys. That was the most fun movie. And then I went up to Trailer Park Boys with him in Canada. I don't know if you know the Trailer Park Boys television. There's no fake marijuana in that show either. That was the best experience I ever had. I'm a huge fan of that. Snoop Dogg and I have done many, many events and things together. I love him, and there's nothing fake about Snoop Dogg. No, but if, like I say, when I was young, in some way, you either drank or you smoked pot. You're either a greaser or you were a stoner, man. And like my coach, our football coach, Dave Clement, who's also the gym coach, he'd take these 5 balls. That's how he coached. That's how I got out of gym. He'd throw it in the middle of the court. It was called dodgeball, and it was very violent. He'd throw them, and he goes, greasers over here, stoners over here, and we just try to kill each other. But I didn't even smoke pot until I was out of high school. I was a complete alcoholic, of course, but I thought bad people smoke pot, good people are alcoholics. But if I'd have just done that, I would have gotten a lot less trouble. I'd still be doing it to this day. High recommend marijuana. You probably will never get arrested for drunk driving or getting in fights with cops, like I had many times.
I've been there.
I don't recommend it.
I've been there too. So that's good advice for the kids. So glad you put that out.
When they're out of here and they're doing their thing, many years from now, I'd rather they did nothing. I'd rather they did. I think they see what happened to their dad with drugs and alcohol. I'm very honest about it. But when they make their decision, I'll be dead. Let's be honest. I'll be dead when they're in college. I'm 100.
Well, let's hope not, because you make me laugh, and I appreciate you coming on and sharing some thoughts. Always fun talking with you, Tom. Thank you, man.
Thank you, man.
Great stuff. Our good friend Tom Arnold. Don't do anything. Just smoke pot, I guess, do that. Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1998. That was the first day of a 48-hour general strike in Puerto Rico. The strike was called in support of telephone workers who had walked off the job 3 weeks earlier. The workers were protesting government plans to sell off the publicly owned telephone service to GTE, a private company based out of Connecticut. As the strike of the telephone workers continued, more and more Puerto Ricans rallied to their cause. A general strike was endorsed by more than 50 unions, along with other civic, political, and religious groups. The group of organizations leading the strike went by the acronym CHAOS. For 2 days, the general strike shut down almost all activity in the nation. Work at stores, banks, and the halls of government ground to a halt. Transportation ground to a halt as bus drivers and taxi cab drivers took to the picket lines. Many in the crowd waved Puerto Rican flags. In the streets, the chant could be heard, "Hilga, Hilga," or "Strike, strike." Many also chanted, "Never surrender. The telephone company belongs to the people." The strike won support outside of Puerto Rico as well. The Health and Hospital Workers Union 1199 in New York issued a statement of solidarity and a $100,000 donation to help support the cause. After the success and support of the general strike, the telephone workers remained on the picket line. The strike wore on for 41 days. In the end, GTE won the day. The company promised not to retaliate against any striking workers. But when they took over, the company reduced staffing through so-called voluntary layoffs and early retirements. This is yet another chapter in the fight against privatization. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I'll tell you, he cracks me up, Tom Arnold. Always good to have him on the program, and for a good chuckle. And the thing is, it's always a fun ride. Not sure where you're going to go. Never did get a response on the Roger Stone pardon. I don't think it's going to happen. Trump doesn't help friends. Trump helps Trump. And I think Roger Stone is going to find that out very soon. Here's an interesting story caught my attention. We've been talking a lot about the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program, passed in one of the coronavirus stimulus plans. And, I said from the beginning, no corporate interest, no employer should have gotten a dime. This should have all gone to the workers. This should have all gone to the people who were missing paychecks and were forced to stay home. And now we're finding out there are a lot of people who should not have gotten anything. And one of them is, I can't even believe that they applied for it. But the Ayn Rand Institute, the Center for the Advancement of Objectivism in Santa Ana, California, they were claim they preserved 35 jobs. They're approved for a couple $100,000, some obscene amount of money, to where I guess it's up to $1 million. They didn't give an actual number, so potentially up to $1 million to save these ideologues' jobs, these people who worked in a think tank. When you think about saving jobs, you're thinking about, and making sure that our manufacturing base is taken care of, making sure our transportation systems are good, making sure that people who are productive, I would argue people who are productive and do something useful for society, that those are the jobs you want to save if you had to go to a program like this in the halfway style that they did. I think most of us think this way. But the Ayn Rand Institute asking for this money is just, for those who don't know, maybe facts not in evidence. Ayn Rand was horribly anti-government. This laissez-faire capitalist mentality that government should do nothing. There should be no government programs. Ayn Rand herself was against, any government intrusion in business or any government anything. So no Medicare, no Medicaid, no Social Security, even though in old age she did take Social Security because she was poor. Capitalism had basically screwed her over, and she took, against her whole ideology, she took Social Security. But this is an organization who their goal is to basically say that government has no use in doing anything, but yet they're going to take the money. And at the end of it, you go, it's there, so why not take it? But this is, again, this is an organization that said government should do nothing. So as a matter of ideology, wouldn't you think that you would be true to your principles and your beliefs like you claim? Who's John Galt? He's the poor man who got screwed over by the government. Or in this case, the guy who, got a couple of bucks so he could feed his family during a global pandemic. But hey, it is what it is. We're also finding that, hundreds of millions of dollars are going to Trump supporters. The big donors who gave the Trump campaign money, evidently there have been a number of organizations that have looked into it. According to the Associated Press, who wrote this most recent story, about $273 million went to about 100 companies who were either owned or operated by major donors to the Trump campaign. And you go, yeah, and? No surprise there. We knew that from the beginning. It's always the well-connected. It's always the people with the lobby money. It's always the people with the, well, hey, can you help me out with this? The poor stiff whose small business has been closed down and probably never going to reopen, who hired 2 or 3 people and, struggling to get by, they got screwed. While groups like the Ayn Rand Institute got upwards of $1 million freaking dollars. You know what $1 million could do on Main Street? In a place like where I live here in central Pennsylvania, you know what $1 million could do to help this local economy? And yet they gave it to people who do nothing but put out nonsensical propaganda BS. But I know we saved 35 jobs that weren't going anywhere, mind you, because those were people who clearly could have worked from home, because you can put out mindless drivel from home. Also, we find out from the American Independent that 8 anti-LGBTQ groups got got somewhere between $2.6 million and $6.4 million. Again, we were told, help save those jobs, those people who had to stay home. Those workers in the factories and those workers, in all the airlines and all the other stuff that got shot down. Evidently not. Evidently, we got to have our queer bashers. Got to make sure that they're getting paid. Can't you gay bash from home? Couldn't you have telecommuted your hatred for gays? Evidently not, because upwards of $6.4 million went to groups like the American Family Association, which is just a hate-mongering group from top to bottom. The Center for Arizona Policy, according to their website, they call non-discrimination laws for LGBTQ people a sword against individuals, businesses, and organizations who have a historic understanding of marriage and gender. Concerned Women for America got upwards of $350,000. They're the ones who say, well, we can't have, any protections for anyone other than man and woman, because we women get certain protections because of this binary choice, which is ludicrous and mind-blowingly stupid. But we probably gave them upwards of $350,000. The James Dobson Family Institute, I don't even know where to go with Dobson, getting upwards of $1 million. Just crazy religious people, cashing in off their hatred of others. The First Liberty Institute, upwards of $1 million to them, also doing a bunch of gay bashing. And the Liberty Council, which, they're the ones who file a bunch of lawsuits, so I'm not saying anything bad about them. Full disclosure, I know nothing about the Liberty Institute. I say nothing bad about them, other than the fact that they're the law firm that goes after and sues the hell out of everybody. So my earlier disclaimer is to make sure that I don't get the hell sued out of me, because that's what they do, frivolous lawsuits, tons of them. Also, the Pacific Justice Institute, upwards of $350,000. They're gay, doing their according to the report, they believe that that LGBT History Month promotes gay porn to children. That's their belief. So that's what they're pushing. Also, the Family Leadership, the Leader Foundation, upwards of $350,000 to them. And again, one of these, always worrying about what somebody else is doing within the confines of their walls. And to be honest, I don't care what you do. I don't care what consenting adults do within the confines of their four walls, as long as it doesn't affect me. You do what you got to do. Be happy. Life, liberty, pursuit of your happiness. Pursue it. I just don't think our tax dollars should have gone to these kind of groups. But you go, but Rick, they save jobs. No, all of those jobs could have easily been telecommute jobs. They're not actually producing a product. They're producing written stuff that we have this magical thing called the internet. All of them could have easily done their hate from home. Easily. We also find out that Mitch McConnell's wife's family made out fairly well. At least $350,000. They're saying upwards of $1 million. They claim was approved to save 20 jobs at the Foremost Group, which is a company that's owned by Elaine Chao's family, her father and sister. What I found interesting about that is the loan was approved for them on April 15th, which is only like 2.5 weeks after the bill was passed. And how long did it take for you to get your $1,200? It was like a month later for most people, right? How long did that take? But yeah, the Elaine Chao's group, April 15th, they got their money. Huh. I guess it pays to be married to the Senate Majority Leaders. I guess it pays, right? But the weird thing is, and again, the reason I bring this up is it highlights how little power we working people really have. It highlights how the rich and the powerful and the connected continually get what they want, and even more than they need, at the expense of everybody else. Had you taken that money, and I'm going to stand by this position, Had you taken that and just given it to every American working person, it would have filtered its way back up anyway. These businesses would have extracted it from us anyway. We don't have the leadership in this country to deal with this kind of pandemic, to deal with the kind of crisis that we're in the middle of. And look, I've been saying for a while, we've got to come to the fall, we've got a childcare crisis that's going to be unimaginable. What are people going to do with their children if schools don't reopen? What are they going to do once they reopen and got to close them back down because now everybody's sick? We have a health insurance problem in this country that could get considerably worse after the election if Trump wins. Because understand, Joe Biden, if he wins in November, doesn't take office until January 20th, 2021. That means from the beginning of November to the middle, close to the end of January, Donald Trump is still in office. And a lot of ugly, horrible things are still going to happen. And this is why I keep coming back to this moment where, look around and see where we are as a country. And that the dimmest are the dangerous. And, fortunately, they've self-identified themselves. Fortunately, they're the ones who are telling you by not wearing the mask that they don't care about you or the country. And I would argue those are the ones who probably did all right during this. But I get emails from working people all the time saying, look, I'm still struggling. I'm forced to go back to work. That extra $600 really helped. But now I've got to go back to work to this crummy job. And I don't feel safe. And, it just comes down to one of those kind of moments where at some point we need to exert our collective power and begin the organizing process. That's simple. But again, as I said, the well-connected, the powerful, the moneyed interests, the folks who have the ability to hire lobbyists, they did really well in the Paycheck Protection Program. You and me, not so much. And the millions of people who are still out of work, who here at the end of July are going to lose that additional $600 that has created the ability to not have millions of people fall into poverty because of the unemployment. That's going to go away. Now, Mitch McConnell evidently claims that there's going to be a fifth bill. But again, his line in the stand is blanket immunity for employers. Blanket immunity for unsafe workplaces. Blanket immunity if you go to work, get sick because your employer did nothing to help protect you. Sorry, that was your choice. And as we've said on this program for years now, we've been marching slowly toward that Lochner era. We've been moving slowly back in time to the days where if you were desperate enough and hungry enough and your family was on the verge of starvation, that you would go and take crappy jobs with poverty wages in desperation conditions. That was your liberty. It was your freedom. It was your right. Because you're an American. We're marching right back to that. And this is just hastening the pace of it. This pandemic is hastening the pace of all of the horrible things we've been talking about. The move towards automation, the data collection, the magnifying of how bad our healthcare system is for a good portion of working people, our childcare system, our family leave programs. Go down the list of all the problems that have not been addressed over the last 40 years. And we're at a moment where right now, it's coming home to roost. Now, the question is, politically, what do we do? That's the question. Well, is Joe Biden the answer? Well, I know Donald Trump is not. Gonna take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1905. It was the 10th day of the convention in Chicago, Illinois, where William Big Bill Haywood of the Western Federation of Miners and Daniel De Leon and Eugene V. Debs of the Socialist Party founded the Industrial Workers of the World. The IWW, or Wobblies as they're sometimes called, was formed in part in response to the American Federation of Labor's opposition to organizing unskilled labor. Bill Haywood proclaimed in the founding convention, "This is the Continental Congress of the working class. We are here to confederate the workers of this country into a working class movement that shall have for its purpose the emancipation of the working class from the slave bondage of capitalism." In the first 2 decades of the 1900s, the IWW cut across traditional guild and union lines to organize workers in a variety of trades and industries. Many notable people were either members or supporters of the IWW, including Mother Jones, Elizabeth Gurley Flynn, and Joe Hill. Hill, along with Ralph Chaplin and T-Bone Slim, compiled a book of labor songs in 1909 known as the Little Red Songbook.
I dreamed I saw Joe Hill last night, alive as you and me.
The Wobblies were opposed to U.S. involvement in World War I, which they called a war for capitalism and empire. However, in 1917, Congress passed the Espionage Act, which exacted harsh financial penalties or even jail time for anyone speaking out against the war. One of the people arrested under the Espionage Act was Bill Haywood. In the aftermath, the IWW declined in membership and influence. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, you can email me, rick at thericksmithshow.com. So, interesting little bit in that the White House is defending Trump's claim that COVID-19 is harmless. Defending it and defending his position that 99% of the people, 99% of the people have nothing. It's not a problem. There's nothing there. 99%. And yet the charts that Kayleigh McEnany put forth actually showed that the death rate is 4.6%, not the 1% that she was claiming Trump was right on. And this is, I keep coming back to this position of how would you like to have to work for someone like Donald Trump, for somebody who would just basically make stuff up as he goes, and then you have to go and try and defend that. I mean, it's really kind of crazy. But here she is, defending something that Trump said, that it's harmless and that 99% of the people are, just fine, when the numbers actually don't bear that out. But you still got to go out there for dear leader and make the point. It's like when we were talking with Tom Arnold and he was saying, Joni Ernst is, carrying the water for Trump, where she could be, someone who was willing to stand up and protect the people of Iowa. Someone who was in an abusive relationship could be someone who stood up and protected women. She's not. I mean, stop and think about who she's protecting. And, she went after Obama when you had 2 people die of Ebola, but will not say a single word about Trump when we've got over 130,000 people who've died from this. Let that sink in for a second. 130,000 people. And yet this administration is doing everything that they can do to convince us that we're past it. It's over. We're gone. Don't worry about it. Everything's going to be fine. Because magically, it'll just disappear. That's scary. But more importantly, it's not leadership. And this is the reason we're in the position we're in. A total lack of leadership. Which is why I got to tell you, I hope come come November. The sanity rules and the polls hopefully are right, and the Russians don't steal another election, and all of the other things that we've been talking about don't happen. It just is what it is. Anyway, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, China front and center. As you know, I've been talking about how important the issue of China is for years now. It's now turning around. It looks like it's going to be the issue of this election. Going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
Why does Donald Trump refuse to wear a coronavirus mask? Because he realizes that, in a mask, we'd all recognize him as the robber who has been moving furtively behind the scenes of the pandemic to rig the rules against workaday folks to further enrich corporate elites. With media attention riveted on COVID-19 body counts, Trump and company have felt free to monkey-wrench labor laws, dynamite environmental regulations, manipulate the tax code, and generally burglarize our people's commitment to the common good. They're like Robin Hood and his merry band, only in reverse, stealing from the many to give more to the rich few. They've even quietly filched the bulk of the government's multi-trillion-dollar pandemic recovery program, thus dramatically increasing wealth inequality. While you might have received a one-time $1,200 relief check from Washington, major corporations have actually been given the keys to the Federal Reserve's money-printing machine, funneling a long-term giveaway of hundreds of billions of dollars to them. Also, corporate interests are pocketing untold amounts from several little-reported grant programs and tax breaks discreetly created just for them. For example, mysteriously tucked into Trump's first rescue package was a $135 billion tax boondoggle specifically designed for such hucksters as giant real estate developers. Like whom? Well, Trump himself and son-in-law Jared Kushner appear to qualify. Just lucky, I guess. Adding to the peculiarity, this handout had nothing to do with helping America recover economically from the pandemic. Rather, it provides retroactive tax breaks on deals developers cut long before this year's COVID crash. This is Jim Hightower saying, it's Trump and company's version of the old political adage, never let a big crisis go to waste.
To get more of Jim Hightower's populist take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to, visit www.hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So as I've been saying, China is going to be the issue of this election. I've been saying that for several months now, at least. I've been saying that since Joe Biden said China wasn't a problem. No, China's a problem. Today, very happy to hear that Joe Biden has come forth and said that they're going to, when he's president, pursue shifting production of medical equipment and other key pandemic fighting products back to the United States. And look, the thing here for me is Joe Biden can learn. That's the great thing about Joe Biden, I think, that Trump won't learn. So the idea that we're finally going to look at this, I think really important. And here to share some thoughts on, well, what Joe Biden had to say, and if she thinks it's possible, we're going to bring any of this stuff back. I have asked Emily De La Bruyere to come talk with us. She's the co-founder of the Horizon Advisory. Emily, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me back, Rick.
So, any thoughts on Biden finally coming out and saying, "Hey, look, we're going to start bringing some of that production back because we're too vulnerable"? Any thoughts?
I mean, we absolutely need to. If the one hope as we deal with COVID and this global disaster is that it's going to be the wake-up call that makes us realize quite how dependent on China we are and quite how intentionally they have fostered our dependence. And we're seeing that in the pharmaceutical supply chains and in the PPE supply chains. But the important thing we also have to realize is that it's not just that. China has done this across industrial sectors, and by focusing on critical nodes within them that it can monopolize, and that if they're monopolized, make us entirely reliant. So like that's cobalt. You need cobalt for everything from new energy batteries to advanced defense applications. And the DRC produces 60% of the world's cobalt. And guess who has invested in most of the cobalt mines in the DRC? And guess what country imports north of 80% of the DRC's cobalt? And that's just one example.
Yeah.
CNC is another great example. We can't repair our machine tools without parts from China. So we can't create anything without China. And so we need to take this awareness that we've finally sparked with in relation to medical supply chains and apply that across the board to the industries that prop up our system.
Right. But here's the thing, Emily. I've been saying this for probably every moment that I've been doing this program, which is now this Labor Day going to be 15 years. Talking about how we're losing the auto parts industry, how we're losing manufacturing capacity, how we're losing all of the technology and the ability and the brain capital to do these things. And you know, are we at a point finally, maybe now, as this pandemic finally shaken us awake, that we're actually going to do something, or is this just more lip service?
The realist part of me says this is just lip service. The part of me that wants us to have a country that's not in China's hands in not even 10 years, in 5 years, says this is going to happen.
No, that's the scary part. And today, I don't know if you saw it, but Christopher Wray, the FBI director, he came out and said that China, flatline, to summarize what he said, China wants to be the only superpower, and that they're moving full steam ahead on doing just that. And he said that nearly half of their 5,000 active cases are related to China, specifically related to China.
But isn't the amazing thing that this is new. This is news, that we're finally recognizing that China wants to be the only superpower. China has wanted to be the only superpower for decades. China has said it wants to be the only superpower for decades. China has invested such that it can be the only superpower for decades. And now it's like a big deal that we're waving our hands about that realization, not even about a response.
No, I mean, that's, sadly, you're right. Because again, when I read these stories, I go, yeah, I've been talking about this for years. Yeah, we've seen this movie a couple of times. It's been coming, and we talk about it with every administration, which is why I be honest, when Joe Biden, when the primaries were still going on, Joe Biden was my fifth choice, specifically because of his China's not a problem statement, when I think China is the problem.
And the thing about China is the US has done so badly on it in the past that it's one of those issues where experience is almost a negative. Because if you have experience on China, it means you've done it wrong, because we've done nothing right on this question. So the more noob a person is, the more likely they are to get this right.
So is this an opportunity? I mean, we're in this moment of this pandemic. Has, I think, a lot of people thinking maybe there's a new way of doing things. Maybe we take this crisis and out of it, we begin anew and we choose new paths. Any hope that out of this, and look, I know who we've got in the White House. I know who we've got leading the Senate. Is there any chance that we begin anew? Because, I keep thinking, we've got to be thinking like wartime footing kind of stuff right now, because this is without throwing bombs at each other, we're at war.
Absolutely. And China says we're at war. The American institutions as they exist normally are not designed for this kind of a competition. And that's not going to change. So yes, the hope for us is that this kind of a watershed disaster moment puts us into an activated wartime-like situation where we create new institutions and new modes of acting and new modes of allocating resources that can actually deal with a competitor like this. So it's a disaster, but we need a huge change in order to be able to do anything right on this.
Yeah, but I look at our country, we're so polarized, we're so pulled apart. You talk to the average person on the street, you can't get, half the people to agree the sky is blue, let alone how we're going to mobilize a nation to think in a wartime kind of mentality, to reclaim manufacturing, to reclaim productivity. I'll tell you, I don't want to sound too hopeless, but I'm feeling hopeless.
Absolutely. But then this is again where you have that tension between like the realist and the optimist. And there is the optimistic take, which is that yes, we're crumbling from the inside, and at the same time, we're faced with an existential threat from the outside. And there's something that's like Shakespearean tragedy in the whole thing. But what is it that could actually help us bridge the polarized divides? Maybe it's recognizing that we are in an existential conflict with an outside power. Like, if there's something that's going to bring us together, maybe it's defending ourselves from an invader.
But we get such cheap things from Walmart. You know, we need, and this isn't this the argument, but we get cheap stuff, and our economy can't live without cheap stuff. So what will I do?
Yeah. But also, like, at this point, how is it that China's producing the cheap stuff? This is the crazy thing about it, and just like quite how smart their approach is. China produces the cheap stuff because it builds its factories in the developing world. It's not even that this stuff is made in China anymore. It's that China has, with this like newfangled neo-colonial approach, built entire industrial chains and sectors across Asia, across Africa, and also in doing so takes advantage of those regulatory environments that we treat favorably in our trade relations. So like you have these Chinese industrial zones in Africa, and when they write about them, they're like, oh yeah, in this country, the US has a favorable trade relationship, so you get preferential access. So, all of which is to say that we could keep getting the cheap stuff if we just didn't let China get away with its global colonialism.
Okay, but what do you say to the argument? And I get this a lot, but China's just doing what we did. They're just playing by the same rules that we played by. And the last time you were on, I got hammered with this from a bunch of people. Wow, you just want to be the one to do all those horrible things. Thoughts?
China's an authoritarian state that domestically has concentration camps where it exterminates religious minorities, and that actively intends to export its authoritarian regime across the world. And this authoritarian regime brings with it a kind of power that is unlike anything that the US has ever enforced in the world, and even that the US could enforce in the world. China deploys an information-enabled big brother that gives it the kind of power that you would get if Amazon was an authoritarian nation state and Amazon extended its control over your information and over your commercial preferences to every single aspect of your life. That's not something that the US has ever done. That technology didn't exist, but also the US just isn't competent enough to do that. So I would much rather have America be the guiding force in the international system, because at least we rely on other stakeholders,
right?
And we can't get our act together.
No, that's the argument for having the 50 states, that there's no one rule, that you have all the little laboratories of innovation and all of the different rules, and you could never, wrangle all those under one rule. And you're right. The scary thing about China is, virtually every aspect of your life is somehow monitored and controlled, and dissent completely not something allowed. And now we're finding out just how horrible it is as they're imposing these new rules on Hong Kong, which had been kind of like a democratic oasis in that region. They're now claiming that back. And how dangerous is that for the world?
It's so dangerous for the world. And I mean, what's dangerous for the world is Hong Kong in the immediate, right? Because this is the end of China pretending that it's not going to be extending its authoritarian rule internationally. It's the end of freedom in one of the biggest financial hubs in the world. But it's also dangerous in terms of what it suggests about China, what China is doing during the COVID crisis. Because, and we've talked about this a lot, China is using this crisis as an opportunity to accelerate its global strategy. And that was clear off the bat with China's signing 5G deals while no one was paying attention. And it's been clear in Chinese companies buying up global mines while prices drop. And now it's clear in China taking over Hong Kong. And this is just going to keep going while the world is down. So Hong Kong should be a wake-up call, not just of the kind of a power China is, but also how seriously they're taking the present moment as an opportunity.
You know, every day I'm getting news about what's going on in that region of the world. And, you know, just the other day there was a story about the South China Sea. Evidently, we've sent 2 naval aircraft carriers into the area, as you know, the Chinese are again exerting their power in that region. And you know, again, it's this growing control and this growing power that the longer we wait to react to it, well, the more impossible it's going to be to deal with.
Yeah. And also, like, how are we reacting right now? We're sending aircraft carriers. That's great, right? We've recognized they're doing something awesome. We're responding, except how expensive are aircraft carriers deployed all the way over there? How expensive is what's going on? And what does it actually accomplish?
Right, because we're not going to start a war.
Exactly. So maybe it dissuades China for like a moment, but it does nothing to, in the long term, it does nothing to reassure our allies and partners in the region that we're giving them a constructive alternative to China. And in the meantime, China can take that and flip the narrative and say that us sending aircraft carriers is a sign of us destabilizing the region. So like at best, this is ineffective, and more likely it's unproductive. And the whole thing, which actually is pretty parallel to the our Hong Kong response, points to the fact that when you're faced with an adversary like China, you can't respond with direct defensive reaction. That just doesn't work.
Right.
It's like when we do it, it's like if you were playing a game of hockey, but it was spread out on 5 different rinks, and you put all of your players on defense in one rink. And that's pretty much what we're doing. And I'm pretty sure that doesn't work great.
Right. And we've got a guy who's, you know, divided the world already to where our allies don't trust us. And they probably aren't going to have our back if we need them. And the people that we're cozying up to are the people who are probably going to be the ones who want to take us down. We're in this weird kind of this moment where the Chinese are just seizing the opportunity.
That's what they're framing in their policy document says. That's the phrase. It seize the opportunity. And yeah, we can't do anything in this without our allies. And I mean, if we're ever going to move beyond this ineffective direct defensive whack-a-mole, it's going to have to be through a strategic partnership with our allies that has scope and has scale.
Right. And the reason I bring that up is because, you know, just I guess it was yesterday, China signed on to the Global Arms Trade Treaty that we have not. And you know, it's ironic to me because I'm looking at what this global arms trade treaty is and what it's supposed to do about, you know, not selling weapons to countries that have massive human rights abuses. And I'm going, but China's signing on. They're the ones who are committing all these human rights abuses. How are they taking the high road, calling us bullies and calling us, people who are engaging in unilateralism? You know, how is that they've gotten away with it? And the truth of the matter is because we've got the leader we've got.
But also because China is uniquely good at a strategy premised on hypocrisy. They join international organizations and they reap the benefits of them, whether that's the WTO or the UN or the World Bank. And they do that without making good on any of the obligations that come with their position. And meanwhile, while framing a narrative in which they are the mutually beneficial leader and the US is ruining everything. And at the same time, who's the one who's proliferating arms across to North Korea or across the developing world or across the whole world? But they have narrative control and they're careful about this and they're deliberate. And so we end up with a world in which all of the international systems resources go to China. They paint this phenomenal story about themselves, and then they further destabilize the world. And it leaves us with a question of what do you do? If China has subverted an international organization, do the US and its allies stay in that international organization? Can they save it?
Right, which is why I was going to ask you, because today Donald Trump began pulling out of the WHO, the World Health Organization. Is that the right move in this moment when we're in the middle of a global pandemic? Clearly, you know, the Democrats and the Republicans don't think so, but Trump has notified the UN and notified Congress that he's pulling out.
And it could be a great move if it were paired with a productive response. If you leave the WHO, you get the trusted allies and partners on board and you form an alternative quickly, because we need one right now, there's a global pandemic, but that actually is going to do something and that is going to be unhindered by China's approach. and that can be effective.
Yeah, I mean we're in this weird in this moment. So I guess going forward, because I've been saying for a while, the Democrats have got to come up with a response. They've got to be able to fight on this ground, because I don't know if you'll agree with me or not, but I think this is going to be, outside of the racism and the hatred that Trump pushed over the weekend, this is going to be the other issue, and this will be framed also in the racist terms as well. And for me, again, it's not about the color or the nationality. It's about economic power. It's about who's going to decide the next century globally. Do I want it to be us, or do I want it to be a communist state like China? These are questions that are going to have to be answered. What do the Democrats, do you think, have to do?
Well, let's go back to what you said about how this could be an opportunity, right? We get to rewrite the rules. We get a new system. So let's do that in a competitive way. Let's, as we put money into U.S. relief and infrastructure construction, let's make that a competitive industrial policy. One that's geared at setting the foundations and building the foundational infrastructures of the emerging world, and that does that in a way that's protected from China's subversion. When we're responding to China's growing aggressions, let's not do so with the whack-a-mole direct defense in the old methods that clearly don't work. Maybe we try horizontal escalation. When China imposes a national security law in Hong Kong, it's not going to work to just take a bunch of measures in Hong Kong. Maybe we recognize Taiwan. You do something that puts the playing field in your own yard where you have control, and that's actually going to target their vulnerabilities. And meanwhile, you actually form coalitions and partnerships with our allies and with other global players and with the private sector, so that we're not trying to act alone, because that's how we fail, because China is big and because China has a deliberate strategy and they have scope. And the only way we can rival that is by marshaling one of our inherent strengths, which is that we have the best private sector in the world and we have allies and partners.
So basically, I've said it in much more crude terms than you have. We need a new Bretton Woods Accord. We need to divvy up the world again in a different way with our allies, much like we did after World War II, and have to realign some things. Or am I off base?
That's exactly right. And the thing is, the fundamental assumptions of Bretton Woods have proved false, because none of those work when you have a player like China that weaponizes integration. So we need to start with a playing field that acknowledges that and that has stronger defensive mechanisms built in. But yes, that's exactly it. And we still are the leader. We still are the incumbent. And that gives us the power to say, okay, this is the moment, we're working at it again. Let's start afresh. And that's a position on our part that's dwindling. We only have so much longer when we can do that, but it's a huge advantage. So let's do it now.
Right. Again, that's my hope for this election cycle. And like I said, Joe Biden said today we're going to reclaim some of that manufacturing ability. I think that's a step forward, a big step from where he started off with, which is China is not a problem. I hope he's listening, and I hope that I hope we do take some of that on. But Emily, I appreciate the time and the thoughts. I look forward to having you back again real soon. This is not going away. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Rick.
Good stuff. Emily De La Bruyere. She is the co-founder of the Horizon Advisory. You can check out their website. We'll get links out on social media. Really great work they do. Let's take a quick break. Back with your thoughts. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1894. That was the day thousands of Pullman strikers confronted state militia forces at the Grand Trunk Railroad crossing in Chicago. The strike began on May 11th after George Pullman slashed wages but refused to lower rents in his company town. In late June, Eugene V. Debs and the American Railway Union called for a national boycott of all Pullman cars. The boycott spread to 27 states, involving more than 150 20,000 workers. Attorney General Richard Olney issued an injunction declaring the strike illegal on July 2nd. The injunction failed to break the strike, but it did prevent union leaders from communicating with strikers. The next day, President Cleveland ordered troops into Chicago rail yards to crush the strike. Workers were furious. They flooded the yards, stopping trains, smashing switches, and barricading themselves with baggage cars. Fighting continued for several days as angry strikers stormed rail yards and overturned empty freight cars. Thousands of workers impacted by the Depression joined in, including those stranded in the city after the Columbian Exposition. 2 strikers were shot dead on the Illinois Central Railroad on July 6th. Workers responded by setting fire to hundreds of rail cars. Now, on this day, the militia attempted to run a work train to clear the rail yard at 49th and Loomis. Thousands followed the train, showering it with bricks and stones. The troops returned gunfire, killing at least 4 and injuring dozens. Chicago unions soon voted in favor of a citywide sympathy strike, but the railroads quickly hired replacement labor. Federal troops and state militia cleared the railway for business. Main strike leaders were arrested. By the beginning of August, Pullman rehired only those strikers who agreed to never join a union.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So here's some good news. Not. Evidently, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Now remember, all of these different agencies, once they're in the hands of the enemy, not going to do great things for you. Back when Richard Cordry was there, did some good things. One of them was to reel in these payday lenders, these folks who had, the short-term loans with extraordinarily high interest rates, and also, what they do is you write them a check. This is part of the really crazy part of this. You write them a check and you post date it for 2 weeks from now, and they give you a loan based on that check being cashed in 2 weeks. So in 2 weeks, they're going to cash it because they want their money back, plus the fees and the interest and all of that stuff. As we're in the old days, the loan sharks would just come around and maybe break your thumbs or something, or smack you upside the back of the head, or charge you a little bit more with a beating. Now what they do is they just continue to try and cash your check, so which racks up tons of fees for the bank too. Like they were doing it like multiple times a day, which made the Obama administration and Cordry and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau do some regulatory positions on this. Evidently now the Trump administration is chucking all of what the Obama administration tried to do, and I guess it's almost back to the wild west of payday loans. So again, the people who were his funders, they're going to cash in. Poor people again are going to get screwed, and under the guise, and this is what conservatives love to throw out. They love to throw out that poor people just need access to credit, and I agree with that. I do. I actually agree that poor people do need access to credit. Not this kind of credit though. Loan sharking is against the law. This is basically legalized loan sharking in my view. But they're saying, we need, to, open up the credit markets in this time. And they're using this pandemic to make things worse. Now, as I was talking about with Emily, we can do one of two things out of this pandemic. We can change things for the better or for the worse. With Trump in the White House, we're doing some things for the worse, and this being one of them. Now, will this help some people? A couple, I'm sure. Is it going to hammer the poor community even more? Oh yeah, this is going to be, again, we're going right back to where we were. And if I remember right, going back when this was going on in 2017, some of these payday loans for like a month-long loan were like 300% interest. I mean, it's mind blowing on how they've gotten away with just screwing people over. Now, if your goal is to give people, especially poor and working class people, access to credit, which I am 100% in favor of, we could do that through our postal service. We could set up postal banking and have short-term small loans with mild service fees if you had to. We could do that, and it would bring in revenue for the postal service, and it would save jobs, and it would give access to poor people, because there are post offices in poor neighborhoods where there may not be a bank, only the local loan shark on the corner. This might be a way to get credit to people who need it and do it in a way that isn't going to gouge them and harm them for the rest of their lives. Just a thought. But like I said, I'm all in favor of extending credit. People need it. But it can't be the kind that we see out of these payday lenders. It's just horrible. But again, it is exactly what you expect from the Trump administration. It's the kind of policy. This is right in line with what I expect out of Donald Trump and the Republicans. A way to cash in on the poverty, cash in on the misfortune, cash in on the people who are struggling to make ends meet, where they get richer and we get poorer. It's just that simple. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You think opening up the payday loans again? You think going back to the Wild West? Think that's a good idea? Is getting short-term, small lines of credit into poor people's hands worth the enormous costs that are associated with it? Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, Jimmy Martin's going to be here, president of APSCOF, the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties, as we talk about reopening schools, especially our state system of higher education here in the fall. What are they working on and what are they expecting? Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
The only purpose this pipeline ultimately will serve is to boost the profits of its developers.
Big and bad news for pipelines, good news for those who oppose them. Japan reeling from another round of record rains and catastrophic floods. Plus,
we have a plan for building the 100% clean energy economy.
House Democrats unveil comprehensive climate proposal to reach net zero emissions by 2050.
No net?
No net.
All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Flushing the toilet may fling coronavirus aerosols all over. Our toilets have turned on us. Though I can't say I'm surprised after all we've done to them.
Seems only fair. This is your Green News Report.
It was only a matter of time before they rose up to exact their revenge.
Okay, Desi Doyen. After years and years of protests and struggles, we got a whole bunch of good news about pipelines all in one day.
Yes, but we'll get to that in a moment. First,
tease.
Japan is reeling again from another round of record-breaking torrential rainfall over the weekend that triggered widespread deadly floods and mudslides that have killed at least 34 people on the island of Kyushu. Japan has been repeatedly battered by devastating extreme storms in recent years that have killed hundreds of people. Climate scientists say the storms have been intensified due to man-made global warming. In politics,
We are releasing a transformative roadmap for solving the climate crisis.
House Democrats, right before the July 4th holiday, unveiled a sweeping plan for climate action and economic recovery by establishing the groundwork for steering the country to net zero emissions by 2050 with a focus on environmental and racial justice. The 547-page proposal outlines targets and policy mechanisms for establishing a price on carbon emissions and eliminating carbon pollution from cars by 2030 and from power plants by 2040. It embraces much of the Green New Deal without actually calling it a Green New Deal. It won't pass the Republican-controlled Senate today, but the proposal shows voters what Democrats plan to do on climate change.
Good idea. Although, better idea, don't release the plan right before the 4th of July when no one's paying attention.
Good point. Meanwhile, a pipeline palooza of bad news.
Bad news?
Oh, bad news for the pipelines.
Okay.
First up, the U.S. Supreme Court on Monday refused a bid by the Trump administration to jumpstart construction on the controversial Keystone XL tar sands pipeline from Canada. The court kept in place a lower court ruling that blocked the use of a key federal fast-track water permit, but only for the Keystone XL, not for other pipelines. They will be allowed to proceed while environmental reviews are underway.
But the Supreme Court said no, essentially, for now, to Donald Trump on Keystone XL?
Yes.
That's good news, not bad news.
Right. The court's rejection means that almost all Keystone XL construction is delayed until at least 2021.
Sad trombone.
The controversial Atlantic Coast Pipeline, an $8 billion fracked gas project, is now kaput after two of the nation's largest utilities announced they are abandoning the project due to increased regulatory scrutiny and delays that ballooned costs and hampered the project's profitability. The stunning cancellation from Dominion Energy and Duke Energy comes just weeks after the U.S. Supreme Court cleared the way for the pipeline to cross underneath the iconic Appalachian Trail.
Nobody wants pipelines. So sad.
But there is a twist. In a separate deal, billionaire investor Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway has purchased all of Dominion Energy's natural gas pipeline and storage assets. If approved, Berkshire Hathaway will then control nearly 20% of the nation's interstate natural gas transmission, which would be an incentive to lobby against climate legislation.
Buffett.
And finally, in North Dakota, the biggest pipeline news of all today, a federal judge has ordered the controversial Dakota Access Pipeline to be shut down and emptied completely until the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers completes a more in-depth environmental impact assessment. This is a huge victory for the Standing Rock Sioux tribe, which has fought the Dakota Access Pipeline since it was first proposed, calling it an unacceptable threat to their drinking water supplies and sacred cultural sites. Anti-pipeline protesters were met with violent crackdowns from state officials. Back in March, after a preliminary ruling by the judge, the attorney for the Standing Rock Sioux tribe, Jan Hasselman of Earth Justice, told the Green News Report,
"This is a huge victory for the Standing Rock Sioux tribe and all the people who have supported them over the years. The risks of an oil spill are too great, that the consequences on the Standing Rock are too significant, and this needs to be studied really carefully and in a transparent way."
Important to remember that this is a temporary victory. It's not over yet, but the party may be over for pipelines.
They are, of course, going to appeal this decision, but this is exactly what the Standing Rock Sioux had said. There was no proper environmental study done. Now, maybe it will be.
Maybe.
For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find us, follow us, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So over the weekend, the New York Times ran a story on, colleges are planning on bringing their students back in the fall, but the professors, are they planning on coming back? The Times reported that more than 3/4 of all the colleges and universities that they polled have decided they got to bring people back to the campuses. It's the only way they can stay afloat. It's the only way that they can do what they need to do. But the professors that they interviewed were saying, I'm 70 years old. There is no way I'm going anywhere near a classroom until there's something to protect us. And that's where I kind of thought this is where the conversation I would like to go, because, at the end of the day, it is about keeping people safe. And here to share some thoughts on what her union is doing to help protect their faculty and their professors at our state system of higher education faculty, I've asked Jamie Martin to come talk with us. She's the president of APSCUF, the Association of Pennsylvania State College University Faculties. Jamie, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks again for having me on, Rick. I really appreciate it.
So are you hearing this same kind of thing? I mean, where the state system, the 14 state system schools, where are they at right now in wanting to bring students back?
As of today, all 14 are planning to have students come back face-to-face starting as early as August 10th, and then starting, between then and August 31st.
And have they come up with any ideas on how they're going to mitigate the risk and how they're going to protect your members? Or have you had those discussions?
We've been trying to have those discussions, and my concern is, multifold, but there has been some guidance provided to each university from the state system in terms of a framework. And in that, they basically distilled what the CDC and the Pennsylvania Department of Education, the guidelines they put out, said, here are the guidelines, so make those work at your campus. So, they are saying things like, we're expecting students to wear masks and socially distance and, do all of the things that the CDC is saying. My concern is now when you get down onto the ground and see what's happening, or have some awareness of what the classrooms look like in our campus buildings, what students will be doing in residence halls or in their off-campus housing, all of that guidance seems to fall apart potentially if the students aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing when they're not in class.
Yeah, I mean, but the reality is, they're 19, 20-year-olds who, they feel they're invincible. And look, I remember those days. I remember the feeling of invincibility. And like all of the information that we're getting is, well, most young people, they get it. They don't even know they have it. And that's the other scary part. They may have it and not even know it, and then pass it on to somebody, like the professor who's 70 years old at the front of the classroom.
Well, and again, we're seeing this spike. The Pennsylvania Department of Health sent out an alert over the weekend talking about the significant increase in the number of COVID cases in younger age groups, and really in the age group of students that would be on our campuses.
Right.
So we're seeing that really jump even across the state. So, we have faculty members who are concerned because they have, in fairness, they say, they'll look at ADA concerns. So if somebody needs an accommodation under the ADA, they'll look at those. But we have faculty that have had some pre-existing condition. For example, colleagues who maybe have had cancer that they are now recovering from, that might not fit under some kinds of guidance. But more importantly, what if you have a child or an aged parent that you live with who could be at heightened risk if you bring this virus home?
Right.
So those are the kinds of things we're hearing, and those are the kinds of accommodations and flexibility that we would like to see our university presidents and at the state system level be listening to us on that.
And the other thing is we still don't know, and there's been some recent talk of just how contagious this is via the airwaves, because look, we know that if it's in the air, it's going to be contagious. But they're saying that it's even worse than they thought, and being in a closed classroom with air conditioning, because we're never going back to just opening the window. That's not happening. So having these closed spaces with the closed circulated air, this is kind of like a breeding ground, isn't it?
Absolutely, and again, because. And you hit the nail on the head. The students, they want to come back, and most of our faculty can't wait to be back face to face with the students when it's safe,
right,
for the students and for for my colleagues. But they're going to be going out and doing the things they like to do and congregating together, and then coming back into the classroom. You talked about the air exchange. That's something we're really, really concerned about. We'll have folks that are teaching 3 classes back to back to back in the same classroom. So you can have students leaving, but more students coming in, And without that good air exchange and good HVAC systems, that's a concern.
Yeah, and
we have concerns.
Yeah, I mean, are you going to have somebody come through and clean between classes? Is that something that's going to happen?
No, there's not going to be enough time to do that, nor
Right.
not enough custodial staff. There, in some places, the plan is for faculty and students to be cleaning up after themselves.
Oh, yeah, that's going to happen.
About, and that's based on the premise that you have enough cleaning supplies.
Right.
And so even if it could happen, you have to have enough supplies there for it to happen. We're concerned about testing capabilities on some of the communities where our universities are located, contact tracing.
Right.
And the other thing we asked, if I'm teaching a class and you find out that one of my students tested positive, are you going to notify the students and the faculty member? And we can't get even a yes/no answer on that.
Right, because it's a HIPAA violation if they tell. So there's a lot to this that hasn't been worked out. I mean, every day, someone's emailing me saying, "Hey, what about this? What about this?" And it just shows how little our leaders have done to help provide the guidance that everyone's going to need. The only guidance that I've seen coming out of Mitch McConnell is immunity. They want to give a blanket shield immunity to employers because, hey, we don't know. Instead of saying that, hey, there've got to be certain guidelines that you follow before you get this immunity, they just want plain old good old fashioned. Well, it's your fault. Too bad.
Right, and and the state system has indicated, not directly, but we're hearing it in some of the House legislation and other areas at a Board of Governors meeting about sovereign immunity that state agencies would have. So this has been a difficult few weeks as we're getting closer to the start of the fall semester, and I'm hearing from so many faculty who are telling these heartbreaking stories about having children or aged parents that really are at risk, and they feel as if they have to make the decision to either be in the classroom and risk getting the virus, or the only other option that they have at this point is to take unpaid leave.
Right. And how many people can do this? And this goes back to what I said months ago when this really broke out. I said, workers have to have an actual choice. When you reopen, unemployment should continue as long as people want to stay on it, as long as they choose to. If they don't want to go back to an unsafe workplace, they should have the choice to stay on unemployment and ride it out, or go back to work, and employers provide safe workplaces. To me, that's the way I think forward is. But you hit something there that I think for a second I want to focus on, because this kind of immunity idea just isn't for the professors. It's also for the people in the classrooms. So the reality is, if the universities do get this kind of immunity or do have it, what's stop from going, we're not going to do anything, or we'll do the minimal what we need to do. Yeah, too bad if people get sick.
Yeah, and the bad thing is we worked pretty collaboratively recently with the individuals at the state system, with the Office of the Chancellor. We're seeing better relationships on universities, but this feels as if it's beginning to really drive a wedge in those relationships, because I don't know. There have been days I feel as if I'm saying, hey, there's a tsunami coming. Hey, there's a tsunami coming, and everybody's like, it's not going to hit us. We're going to be fine.
And it's that mentality that's gotten us right back to where we started from with these rising numbers. But and I'm sad to hear that, because now is the moment where you guys and the state system should be really walking shoulder to shoulder and figuring out how to keep not just the students safe, but also all of the faculty safe. So let me ask you the opposite side of this. Do you see any way moving into the fall that you can keep people safe, that you'd be able to, given what we know and what we know, 19, 18, 19, 20-year-old kids are going to do, is there any way to keep them safe and to keep the faculty safe?
Honestly, Rick, I just feel like we're rolling the dice. I want to know what's the number. Like, what's the number of students who have to become ill, or the number of faculty who have to become ill before they kind of shut it down? And it just seems inevitable. So and I'm typically pretty optimistic and try to find the bright side and silver lining. I just don't see it here. I mean, I really am fearful that we're going to see outbreaks on campuses, that students are going to get sick, faculty are going to get sick, and I'm hoping that there's a plan in place for if this happens, or this is how we're going to deal with it, and I'm just not seeing that level of detail in these plans.
Yeah, well, I'm not seeing that anywhere. And again, that comes back down to a failure of leadership at all levels. For me, the sad reality is you've got moneyed interests and really powerful forces pushing this reopen. We'll get through it, just power through. This kind of line, or we're tough, we can do it. That mentality, because it's all about the money. And then there are people like me who, I don't want to end up being one of the dead ones. One of my loved ones being one of the dead ones, and I'm going to be a little more cautious. So, it's how do you find that, if there is middle ground, how do you find that?
And we're about to send out a survey this week to faculty to gather some information. We have some colleagues that they're ready to be back in the classroom, and they feel as if they can be safe in that setting. If we're able to bring back the number of students that you can actually make sure you can do social distancing and keep them safe and kind of monitor their conditions, but with so much asymptomatic transmission of this, even that part becomes tough. But I don't know. It just feels frightening.
It is frightening. Is this going to be a scenario where, because I'm thinking of, college courses that I took, and it's a very intimate relationship that the student and the professor has. Is this a moment where you're starting to see giant plexiglass shields going up around the professor? And like I said, a professor in a box.
Absolutely. They're talking about, I know at some of the universities, they're planning to put plexiglass in front of professors, like the station, the teaching station. The students would have to wear masks. Some faculty are talking about wearing masks, and then the plexiglass, the shields. So all of those are kind of baked into these plans. But again, that's assuming everybody is looking out for each other. And I'm not being critical of our students. I mean, this has been, great joy of my life to work with young people. But you said it, and I remember when you're in college, there are things, the curricular part's important, but the extracurricular part is important too. And that usually involves congregating in groups.
That usually means, 100 people in a 50-person space.
Right. And again, I'm not being critical. That's just part of, the developmental trajectory. But all these plans are built upon or based upon everybody taking care of each other and doing the right thing for other people.
Right.
And when that breaks down, then I think the whole thing begins to crumble.
So what do you say to because I have a conservative listener who emailed me and said, this is where personal responsibility matters. This is where you roll the dice, you take responsibility for the actions that you have taken. Is this one of those moments where, hey, you knew better, you shouldn't have done it, now you're sick, too bad?
Well, clearly we don't want our students to become sick. If they're, but we're seeing this rise in cases because they are doing things like in Allegheny County, especially, they were going on vacation or going out to certain bars and congregating there and not wearing masks and not social distancing. So if they want to make that decision and they're not going to transmit it to somebody else, then maybe. But if the choices you're making are going to put me at risk when I've been doing everything I should be doing to take care of my body and take care of the people around me, now that's a completely different equation.
Yeah, and that's where my response back to that guy was, look, you can be stupid, but your rights to be stupid, shouldn't be allowed to harm me. And this is kind of where it is. So is there any way, and because I keep thinking about, okay, because I know a lot of kids want to go back to school. This is the time in their life where they've got to get the best education they can in this period of time. Is there a way that there can be a fall semester? Are you advocating for going back to the online until this is over with? What are you pushing for?
What we're truly asking for is for there to be some flexibility and accommodation. As I said, we have faculty who have indicated they want to be back in the classroom. Some colleagues I know that really want to be back because they teach labs, maybe clinicals, those kinds of things. If they really want to be back there and they feel as if they can be safe, we certainly don't want to say no, we want it to be a one-size-fits-all.
Right.
What we're really asking for is we have faculty that have concerns for their own safety or the safety of their families.
Right.
Why can't we be thinking about some flexible accommodations for them? And the last point I want to make for sure is I don't think it's going to be possible on any campus to be able to hold every single class face-to-face because of the classroom configurations. So if you have to socially distance, some classrooms are probably not large enough to do that, which means that they'll have to find larger spaces for those. And once you start to move that, it becomes, kind of like a domino effect where you're not going to have enough classroom space. So what we're really asking for is let the faculty be involved as we're making these plans and figure out we might be able to allow flexibility for faculty members who are at risk. We have other faculty that may want to very much be back into a face-to-face situation. I think we can figure it out, but the overarching thing is to make sure people are safe,
Right.
and that our students are safe.
Ultimately, it comes back to that kind of communication and flexibility. And I don't know that we as a country are capable of doing that at this moment. But it's great that organizations like yours are out there fighting for your members and keep up the great work. We'll see how this plays out. I fear for the worst, but I'm hoping for the best. But as always, Jamie, I appreciate you taking time and sharing what's going on with us.
Okay, thanks so much, Rick. Have a good day.
Thanks so much. Dr. Jamie Martin, president of APSCUF, the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties. APSCUF.org is their website if you want more information on what we've just talked about. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1998. That was the first day of a 48-hour general strike in Puerto Rico. The strike was called in support of telephone workers who had walked off the job 3 weeks earlier. The workers were protesting government plans to sell off the publicly owned telephone service to GTE, a private company based out of Connecticut. As the strike of the telephone workers continued, more and more Puerto Ricans rallied to their cause. A general strike was endorsed by more than 50 unions, along with other civic, political, and religious groups. The group of organizations leading the strike went by the acronym CHAOS. For 2 days, the general strike shut down almost all activity in the nation. Work at stores, banks, and the halls of government ground to a halt. Transportation ground to a halt as bus drivers and taxi cab drivers took to the picket lines. Many in the crowd waved Puerto Rican flags. In the streets, the chant could be heard, "Hilga, Hilga," or "Strike, strike." Many also chanted, "Never surrender. The telephone company belongs to the people." The strike won support outside of Puerto Rico as well. The Health and Hospital Workers Union 1199 in New York issued a statement of solidarity and a $100,000 donation to help support the cause. After the success and support of the general strike, the telephone workers remained on the picket line. The strike wore on for 41 days. In the end, GTE won the day. The company promised not to retaliate against any striking workers. But when they took over, the company reduced staffing through so-called voluntary layoffs and early retirements. This is yet another chapter in the fight against privatization.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So as we look to reopen the schools here in the fall, you've got the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Alex Azar, today saying that basically saying that our schools shouldn't be hiding behind the guidance of the CDC. He says nobody should hide behind the CDC's guidance to not reopen schools. He says our guidance is to enable and to empower the reopening of schools and physical attendance by our kids. And also, basically to be able to say that it's your fault, you did it. We had nothing to do with it. Florida today came out and said that their Florida Education Commissioner said all schools are going to be forced to reopen in August. That is their belief. All school districts and charter schools governed by the boards must reopen all of the brick and mortar schools at least 5 days per week for all students in August. Good for them. Also, billionaire Betsy DeVos, she says she wants schools fully operational and fully functional. Not a matter of if, but it's a matter of we've got to get it done. It's a matter of how. So billionaire Betsy wants the schools opened too. What about you? I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Worried about the fall? I know I am. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com.